I have wanted a DIY greenhouse what feels like forever. So I'm really excited to finally have completed this project thanks to my sponsors at the Home Depot. So I know a lot of you want to know how I built it. I'm going to share the process and hopefully you can learn from any mistakes I've made along the way and get a head start on how you want to do yours. Starting from the base up, your foundation is important. Because my property is on a slope, I wanted to build a foundation of cinder block that I could recess down into the ground as my foundation. Primarily that has to do with the water and moisture that I know is going to be coming towards the greenhouse. Ultimately, I would have gravel and some underground gutters around the outside edges, but I wanted to make sure that any moisture that did come through wouldn't move that foundation. But that doesn't mean that's the foundation type that you have to do. If you already have level ground, that might be overkill for you. It might be better to just make sure everything's level and then go ahead and place some gravel down. So in our case, we went about digging to level the ground, and then we placed one wall of cinder block. It's really important to get that first line perfectly straight, perfectly level, and then you're working out from there. Because I chose to attach my greenhouse to my shed, that already provided that one level wall for me to work against. So after getting that first row of cinder block perfectly placed, all I had to do was pull a line, make sure that I had a straight line and it was going to run level, and get my cornerstones set on either end. Once I got my cornerstones set, then we could work in towards each other. I did use long pieces of wood that were cut to the size of the walls of my greenhouse, just to help me make sure that I was headed in the right direction with each cinder block that I placed. Once I got the concrete blocks in place, I filled some of the holes with dirt, and then I poured concrete around the edges. This just helped ensure that it would be set. I did leave a few holes strategically empty so that later, right before we put up our walls, we could go ahead and fill that with concrete and drive some rebar through the framed walls into the concrete and the foundation below. That way, it was all going to be sturdy. Framing the walls was an easy enough process. Basically, you're going to want to build it according to the windows that you have. You never know what kind of recycled windows you're going to get and what size you're going to find them in. So be flexible about your design plan. I used pressure treated wood, and to make the process easier, I went ahead and used the windows to make sure that I got a snug fit. I did use nails wherever I could to attach the frame. However, when I got to that middle section, I did have to drill some pocket holes in order to attach that middle section. If you'd rather not do pocket holes, that's perfectly fine. You can still drive that nail in at an angle. Just make sure that it's going to sit flush up against the wood, or that it's out of the way so that when you pop those windows in, it won't be a hindrance. In my case, I was able to secure it to the shed walls, which made the process a little easier. However, you may want to start with 4x4s at each corner that are sunk down into concrete as your posts in order to keep the whole thing really sturdy, but also to have something to secure it to. Once you have all 4 walls up, then you're going to want to add a second layer of 2x4s all the way around the perimeter where the roof is going to be. That gives you enough stability and sturdiness for your roof. Then finding the center of my greenhouse, I went ahead and added 2x4s secured via pocket holes that were going to be temporarily there just to hold my beam in place. Once my 2x6 beam was in place, I could start putting in my gabled rafters. Depending on the pitch of your roof or how heavy the material is you're putting on it, you may need to use 2x6s. In my case, because of the pitch, I was able to use 2x4s. Admittedly, this whole process took a little bit of trial and error for me. Trying to figure out the angle from the rafter to the edge of the greenhouse was a lot of just cutting, measuring, and checking the angle over and over again. Once that first piece is cut and done and it fits, just use that as your template to cut all the rest. Next, I painted everything out, and then it was time to add the polycarbonate roof sheets. This clear, lightweight sheeting is really easy to install. In order to cut it to size, you just need some shears, and then screw it into place using these specially made screws with a washer and a seal underneath. That way no water gets in. Now it's finally time for the fun part, and that's installing the windows. When sliding your windows in place, you may have to tap them a bit to get them in place because it should be a slightly snug fit. Unless, of course, you made them too open. I chose to have some that were stationary windows and a couple others that would open. I chose to secure my windows in place with screws because you never know when something may happen to the window and you may want to replace it. If you're lucky, all you'll have to do is replace a pane, but you never know. Okay, so now that we're talking windows, there's two important things to note for when you're earlier in the process. One is when you put up those framed walls, you want to make sure that they are properly level and that everything is in the right angle according to the windows so that they can pop in easily. Because if you're off even a little bit, your windows aren't going to slide in smoothly. And because they are recycled windows, if any of your windows have some irregularities, it might be easier to number each window as you're building the frame and make sure that that window goes in that section. So that's it. I wouldn't say easy peasy, but it's doable. Me and my girls were able to do this, and I had a friend who was a mason help me set the cornerstones initially and help me get the rafter beam up. So if we can do it, you can do it. Well, I have more tips, more hacks, and information over on the website, Home Made by Carmona. So I hope you'll join me over there and take a tour of my whole greenhouse as well as my garden. I'll see you there.